Hello. Now, if you live in a place anywhere like me, you may have seen a car that looks like this at some point. And when this happens, I can't help but think of what could possibly be more American. You'd be hard pressed to find anywhere else in the world that has anywhere near the amount of these trucks cruising around the streets of your local suburb. But why is that? As it turns out, the answer spans over a century of culture, business, greed, politics, and legislation. More than that, the answer involves you. Even though the first true car was created in 1885, they really only made it to the States in 1893. These cars were slow, unwieldy, and unaffordable to the average person. While there would be developments in this time, cars didn't really make much sense as a purchase. Cities hadn't been designed for car traffic, and trams were much cheaper and more convenient. Consequently, they became a monster of the elite, taking up space and causing accidents on streets that had formerly belonged to the people. Horseless carriages would scare the passing horses, and cars were just generally noisy. Considering that 60% of the population lived in poverty, it made sense that automobiles would fail to catch on. However, in the 1920s, something changed. The incessant increase in traffic fatalities year on year had led to public outcry for safety measures. One of these was speed governors that would have destroyed the car's marketability as a faster mode of transportation. In response, automakers made their way into discussion with the government, including then Secretary of Commerce Herbert Hoover, to discuss a new solution to pedestrian death, shift the blame on them. And we bought it. Jaywalking was the pitch. Previously, the streets had belonged to all forms of people, but cars were not compatible with this vision. You can see in this image that by 1925, people were struggling to find space on the overcrowded streets of New York. Compare that to this photo a few decades prior. The campaign to place the idea of jaywalking in the mind of the American public was widespread and relentless. There was government-issued propaganda, auto industry-backed car fatality news stories that of course blamed the pedestrians, and most evil of all, education or indoctrination campaigns for school children. When jaywalking finally became something your friends would shame you for, the industry had won. With the responsibility of safety given to the pedestrians, the automobile industry was now free to dictate the streets. While we may have reduced pedestrian deaths since this time period, far more was sacrificed as the years would go by. So cars may have ruled the streets, but you still probably couldn't have afforded one, especially after an economic downturn in 1929. Well, in 1934, one Austrian painter decided to combine the roles of chancellor and president and declared himself Fuhrer. Whilst being the worst thing for humanity since, well, humanity, it would prove it to be excellent for the auto industry. With two cities bombed and one dictator's head spread squarely along a bunker wall, American veterans returned to their country largely unemployed. To remedy this, the economically stimulating GI Bill of 1944 would be passed. A combination of this and the new mass production of single-family homes meant that for the first time, the dream of home ownership was accessible to the average white American. These suburbs were far from the noisy city, the one that had been made noisy by the cars that they would now need to get around. Suburbs like those of real estate contractor Levitt and Sons were too spread out and labyrinthine for public transit to be effective, which meant that long-distance travel would only be accomplished by one means. The assembly line prefabricated nature of the homes was a major appeal to developers, while many homebuyers were still gawking at the novelty of owning land. This means of growth would be wildly profitable, both for the towns and the developers, at least in the short term. This meant that cities around the country would now be expanding their borders and sprawling. Now, for those moving out of the suburbs, the experience of owning a car felt liberating. For once, the American dream of manifest destiny was accessible to the average person, who was now able to barrel down freshly paved and empty roads faster than ever before. Cars had gone from a toy of the elite to the epitome of the ideals America had been founded on, at least on a superficial level. But what did this mean? While brand new suburbs popping up around the country may have been designed for car traffic, cities were still on a pathetically human scale. Once you drove your new Cadillac into the downtown of your nearest city, you'd find no place to put it, at least not with 1,000 other nuclear families who had the same idea. Clearly, something has to give. In 1956, the interstate highway system would be created under President Eisenhower. Prior to this act, the highway system was funded by individual states and there were few standards. Almost all of the routes cited were both brand new and entirely free to use, and thousands of miles of new roads would be paved, often destroying neighborhoods and dividing communities. Much of this was done under the guise of urban renewal, displacing impoverished and marginalized groups to be seen as addressing poverty. This is how we got legendary freeways such as the Cross Bronx, the Katy Freeway in Houston, and the I-90 in Chicago, and various highways littering the front doors of cities across the country. This introduced an evident paradox. In order for people to get to their destinations in the city itself would have to be destroyed. Cities would be changed from places people lived and interacted to a disconnected and isolated grid of office buildings. Since most urban freeways were built over impoverished or black communities, often as a legal way to segregate these communities, those groups would become isolated and neglected, leading to an increased crime of all sorts in the new inner city. People in these neighborhoods likely couldn't afford a car and were now locked out of the economic opportunities in the new car-centric future. As cars became ubiquitous, car culture would grow to become American culture. Public transit would suffer heavily. Streetcar and tram lines were a staple of American culture prior to the war, with Los Angeles having the largest streetcar network in the world. Streetcars fit perfectly into cities because of their electric power, predictability, and ease of use. However, the rising popularity of cars posed a threat to the very numerous streetcar systems in the United States. Cars could drive in streetcar lanes and would slow down the lines in traffic, reducing efficiency and speed for everyone involved. The tram systems were usually all individually owned and largely overbuilt. When cars floated onto city streets, they were enough to offset the delicate balance in place and signal the end for the streetcars. There were also conspiracies of auto industry companies buying up streetcar lines to turn them into buses, especially by GM. This goes to show that the car industry did not stand the test of time, but cheated it. As unstoppable as America's growing greatness may have seemed, it was still necessary to power all of the millions of personal engines and fuel that had to come from somewhere. Originally, the United States was the world's premier exporter of oil, but as demand and dependence grew for factors not limited to cars, the US received the distinction as the world's largest producer of oil, whilst also being a net importer. This has led to an over-centralization of the oil market around meeting the demands of the US. America's appetite for oil has led to world peace threats and unnecessary tensions, all for the ability to inhale noxious fumes. That's right. From the race for oil, we received leaded gasoline, one of the most horrifying uses of our free will. First invented in 1921 by Thomas Midgley, this mixture was used as an anti-knocking fuel source, and lead specifically was cheap and easy to profit from as opposed to the alternative ethanol. This appealed heavily to oil companies who wanted to maximize profit and weren't exactly concerned with the known neurological hazards of lead exposure. Companies such as ExxonMobil and General Motors heavily backed the research and development of the fuel, including campaigns to promote its safety. Once its use had become widely accepted, it would grow to dominate the fuel industry, leading to one of the greatest environmental disasters in human history. Despite environmental concerns and pushback during the 60s and 70s, oil producers did everything they could to prevent the phasing out of the cheap fuel additive. Eventually, though, a phase-out began in 1973, and the element would be completely banned by 1996. During this period, blood lead levels dropped significantly, and the true power of humanity to cause widespread damage was unveiled. The decrease in blood levels is directly tied with a decrease in violent crime. By doing almost absolutely nothing, we were able to save thousands of lives and billions in damages, and a reminder of the potential we possess. In 1964, Lyndon B. Johnson imposed a 25% tariff on light trucks, intended to retaliate against French and West German chicken import tariffs. The ramifications of this tax would be unimaginable. The tariff would essentially squeeze international pickup trucks out of the market, meaning less competition for domestic automakers. Combining this with the much looser fuel economy standard and the corporate average fuel economy legislation for vehicles classified as light trucks would mean that automakers can make considerably more profit selling large cars with poor efficiency. A few major developments would come with this. Firstly, the station wagon would be gradually phased out of the market because they could not be classified as a light truck. Two new product categories would be introduced to fill the gap. The minivan would be introduced as the alternative family vehicle but would not catch on in North America as well as the SUV. The original SUVs were essentially pickup trucks with a longer roof, which ties into what made them so important: their pickup truck chassis. These rigid frameworks are designed to be able to carry heavier weights and improve handling in off-road conditions, but were however disastrous for both fuel economy and safety. As ideal as these cars were for the companies that produced them, they would still be a tough sell to the average consumer. These vehicles were expensive, inefficient, inconvenient, more prone to rollovers, and incredibly destructive in accidents. So how did they do it? The original SUVs appealed to one of the most fundamental American ideals of all: fear. Americans are both obsessed with crime and fearful of it. For them, SUVs represent the other thing that Americans are also obsessed with: security. The world is a dangerous place filled with dangerous drivers, so you should keep yourself safe with a big car. That way, if you're ever in an accident, you can assure yourself that you will come out on top. Once enough people have them, it becomes irresponsible to not have one should you want to endanger the lives of you and your children if you're in the target demographic. In doing this, light trucks harm everyone not inside of one in an over-centralizing safety arms race. This is comparable to being held at gunpoint and arguing the solution is for everybody to carry at all times. This is not at all to mention the excessive proliferation of pickup trucks far beyond their use as workmen's vehicles and into a lifestyle item for suburban families and insecure men. The mine's bigger mentality permeates until the car you drive serves as an extension of your personality. American culture is a culture of excess, so these cars can slot themselves in as toys for vanity without looking like you're compensating for something because everyone is doing it. The most important thing to remember is that these cars are not sold to you because they're the most practical, which they're not, but because they make whoever is selling them to you more money. So what now? Our present already looks pretty bleak with the current scenario of transportation. There's a lot of division on this topic between people who want to maintain the status quo of car dependency, generally the upper class, and those who are against it. For the elite, the reasons are obvious. Car dependency keeps people poor and divided. For the people who can't afford cars, their lives will be made significantly worse than if they lived in a place where mobility is accessible to everyone through mixed-use areas with useful public transit access. For the people who can afford cars, not only do they reaffirm the social hierarchy, but put more money in the pockets of the ones at the top. While cars will always serve a niche role, it wouldn't be so harmful to imagine a different future. Some other countries like Norway and the Netherlands already are and are seeing incredible results in health, efficiency, livability, happiness, and 1,000 other metrics that show us that the direction forward, while a rocky path, is clear.